So there are a lot of people who have asked for this that couldn't make it today, which is why we're going to do the recording. Just want to let you guys know. And we'll have it hosted on both the St. Louis EFT community page, and then Chad and I, since we host a lot of these, we'll have it as a free resource on the Real MHOFs page as well. So just so you guys know that that will be there, that you're being recorded, which is okay.
Mhm. Well, it's 11:30, so we may still have a couple people kind of coming in. Angela, are you going to be okay to continue to admit them
Yep.
if you're okay, if as they come in? Um, so I'm Courtney Baker. Like I said, I'm president-elect of our St. Louis Community EFT Board. Um, just a bit about how this came to be. Sue, who's our current president, was offering a Hold Me Tight workshop and had just posted on a Facebook group asking for some advice, I think, right, on the best way to do something. And Angela volunteered to call her and gave her some of an hour of her time to kind of talk her through ideas. It was such a lovely gesture, which she does a lot, I guess. And so through their conversation, Angela said, well, what if I put together a training? I mean, you're not the only person interested in this. What if I put together a little training? And you guys, St. Louis Community can host it. If you guys can handle the legwork of hosting, I'm happy to volunteer my time. Then I can get this information out in a really effective way, and then we can record it. And then when people ask questions, they'll have a recording to refer to. So it's so lovely of her to volunteer her time to be here. She is going to talk a little bit about kind of how she got here. So I'm going to turn the floor over to her unless there's any other questions anybody has right off the bat. We're going to leave everybody muted, but it'll be different times where Angela may ask for feedback. And then, Angela, did you say they should just like use their little hand gesture
They
or
can, or I'll just say
okay,
unmute and start talking
unmute and start
when we
talking?
get there
Okay,
for sure.
yeah. And then there'll be some helpful stuff in the chat too. So,
So let's start with giving a big shout out and thank you to the St. Louis community for doing this. Like I said, I just or like she said, I just actually like to encourage people to host marriage workshops for couples or couples workshops. Um, and so when anybody is interested, I want to share all the insight that I've learned along the way. So I'll give you a little bit of history about how I'm even in EFT and in the EFT community and who I am, and then ask a few questions of you just so I understand my audience a little bit better. So just out of curiosity, my assumption is that most of you are therapists, but I don't want to assume that there aren't any non-therapists in here. So that's the hand I'm going to say. If you're not a therapist and maybe you're a community leader or some other profession that is interested in hosting in your community, a couples workshop, will you just wave at me so that I know that a few other of you exist? Yeah, we got one there. No, all therapists. Okay, okay. That lets me know who I'm talking to. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of backstory then. If I'm talking to therapists, I know that most of you have gone on a journey of getting your master's, and then even some of you even further than that. And so 13 years ago now, I was a student getting my master's in marriage and family therapy. And one of my professors, his name was Dr. Ryan Reyna. At the time, had just started dating a guy. His name was Chad Emhoff, and he and I were dating and had just gotten engaged and then married. And Ryan asked us to go to a training in New Orleans at Tulane School of Social Work, and it was about emotionally focused therapy. And we had no idea what it was about. But Ryan made a joke that apparently one of the interventions is you have to turn to your partner and say some vulnerable stuff. And that was really all we knew. And so we went there. We went to this training. It was an externship. For those of you who know about the path to get EFT trained, there was something at the training called a live, where a therapist doing a session with a real couple brought the couple in. And the goal was that George Fowler, the trainer that was hosting it, was going to work with that couple. And in the other room, a whole group of therapists watched the session. So for those of you who know this process, this is what it was. And so Chad and I were there. I was still in grad school. Chad had just graduated. We knew nothing about EFT. And the couple that was meant to come, something happened and they couldn't make it. And so Ryan said, hey, we've got a married couple here. So Chad and I got volunteered kind of for to be the live. And so there we are. We've decided to say yes to this. And George Fowler starts doing EFT therapy with us. By the way, I'd never been in therapy like that, couples therapy, before. I had no idea what I was getting into. And about 20 minutes in, I'm sobbing about how nobody ever saw me as a child. And Chad tried to comfort me. I rejected it because I'm an escalated pursuer. And I, at the end of it, thought, I don't know what he just did, what kind of voodoo magic this is. But I think every couple on the planet needs to experience it. We were hooked from there. So that started our very long friendship with George Fowler and Ryan Reyna. And then James Hawkins came along to the party somewhere in the mix. And that's how the five of us are now the team for success and vulnerability. We make training videos for therapists. And so that's a little bit of our history. Chad went on to get his PhD and decided to do a dissertation on Created for Connection. So let me tell you a little bit of history about this particular workshop and how it came to be. Sue Johnson wrote Hold Me Tight. And the thing I love about it, and I'm going to go ahead and share just to kind of kick us into my PowerPoint. Tell me if you guys can see my screen. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning here. Can everybody see it? Yes. Okay, let me go this way and that'll kick us right to here. And I think we're on the side here. And I'll kick in and out of this so we can kind of stay in gallery view as well. The thing about Sue Johnson is that she wrote a book for couples. So this content, while a lot in my grad school training, maybe I believe and therapists have believed this is really hard content and it's too much for couples and it should really only be in the therapeutic setting. The truth is, she wrote this content and she handed it to couples because she felt that couples could handle it. They're already in distress in their kitchens, on their road trips and vacations, in their bedrooms. They're already understanding the dance. They just don't have language to it. And so because she wrote it, I believe that all of us have the capacity to host a conference that can help couples understand it better. That's the goal. So a shout out to the late and great Sue Johnson for wanting to put this in the hands of couples. I feel like we're just the kind of arms and legs that continue her mission to help couples feel more connected. And so Hold Me Tight had been out for quite some time. There was a therapist in Tennessee, his name is Kenny Sandiford, who worked a lot with the faith community. And he came back to Sue and said, hey, there's a population of people that really prefer, because faith is so important to them, that letting somebody else in, that they have a version of this book that is a faith-based book. So then they co-wrote Created for Connection, which is Hold Me Tight, that has a faith impact as well. And these are the two versions. So from this, they created these facilitator guides, and the facilitator guides will walk you through it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But Hold Me Tight had been empirically studied, and the impacts of it were really good. When Created for Connection came out, it had just come out and had not yet been studied yet. So Chad, my husband now, because we got married and here we are 13 years later, he decided to study the impact of Created for Connection in the Christian community to see if there was same, less, greater impact. The interesting thing is that the original facilitator's guide was written to be done in a community group setting. So in a like small group that already had trust, and over the course of, let's say, 8 to 10 weeks, they would take a conversation each week. And we decided to test it in a Hold Me Tight weekend intensive format. So here is what we did. I'll stop sharing and then I'm going to go back and forth with sharing. We invited 4 couples, 4 friends that were couples, into what we called our test study. And Chad and I did a dry run of an intensive weekend with the material. And then they gave us, as harsh as they could possibly give us all the feedback. What did we over talk about? What did you understand? What didn't you understand? How'd the conversations go? And then from that, we created what we were going to run the test study on. So we did 5 created for connections in a row. It was actually over 7 weeks, so we had 2 weekends off. But for a Friday and Saturday over the course of 7 weeks, and all the participants did a pre-test, a mid-test, and a post-test. And we studied the material, and Chad's very what do you call that? Not educational, but that's what it is. I forget what the word is right now. Yeah, my brain is forgetting what the word is. Didactic, academic. That's it. Thank you, chat. I love it. Put the words in the chat. His very academic dissertation that has all the details and the stats of the impact of how couples felt more connected after it. And we actually did one whole group, about 26 couples who had been in 12-step programs, and they had great results as well. And so he has a little extra sidebar. So that was 7 weeks, and we thought, yay, Chad's dissertation is done, as are we. We're going to move on with our life. About 2 months later, we started getting emails of couples saying, my friends went to this workshop and it was life-changing. Are you going to host another one? Can you have another one? When's your next one? And so we ran the first 6 for free. And then started realizing, oh my gosh, we have so many hours into this, we should start charging. We didn't even know what to charge. And we fumbled through hosting a few more. The first 3 we hosted sold out. And then we were like, okay, we've got to host more of these. And then COVID hit. And that shut everything down. We tried a few online, and we're delightfully surprised at the amount of people who were engaging in this kind of capacity, online capacity. The requirement was that the couples had to be sitting side by side and in front of the same camera, and they couldn't turn their camera off until it was conversation time. And then we sent them to have their conversations. And so that's our history. I was telling the ladies before we got started that we've lost count, but we've done over 35 of these, not only in our local area. We've done them in Florida, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Louisiana. We've traveled and done them as well. So my hope today, giving you kind of the history of how I got here, and Chad as well. He's the doctor, PhD, has studied this and certified EFT supervisor. I am not even a licensed therapist. I'm on staff at a church. I run a 12-step program. I'm the ministry leader for a 12-step program, and I work with contraindicators. I work with couples with addiction and abuse and affairs, and that's kind of where I got in. And so Chad and I in our community host these. We host both Hold Me Tights and Creative for Connections. Most of the time we host Creative for Connections, and I'll explain why that works for us, because that's our influence. But I'm going to ask you some questions about who you want to impact and why, what the community is you want to reach, and give you just some of the logistics. So back to screen sharing, and I'll check the chat. If there's something that I'm missing in the chat because I'm talking to you and not paying attention to the chat, just unmute yourself and ask the question. I'm a pretty laid back, low key person, and so I won't be at all upset if you interrupt because you have a question. So let me go back to the main things that we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to go to the next one. The 3 let's see. Hopefully that I can do this. There it is. We're going to talk about logistics, content, and then follow-up. And hopefully by the end of this, my heart is to empower you to host one of these in your area. It is absolutely something that is possible, and I want to give you as much confidence and information so that you feel like, yes, I can do this. I'm ready for it, and I want to help create a safe space for couples to be able to do this. So let's dive in. This is an interesting thing about EFT that was different than in my master's program when I was learning about some of the other theories. I felt like the other theories put you in the position of expert. I'm the expert sitting in this chair. I know the answers and I'm going to tell you. I feel like EFT is a little bit different than that. This is, I'm the facilitator and you're the expert if you're the couple sitting in front of me. Because your emotions are telling you something and I'm just the guide to help you figure out what that is. So your experience is your expertise, what you have been through, gone through, have a felt sense of is really what, just like you are in a session with a couple, when you're in the front of the room, it's with couples for one of these marriage conferences or couples conferences, it's the same. If you are up there as the expert that's here to help them, it just lands differently than I'm just somebody in a relationship. Have a fight with my spouse in the kitchen on a regular basis, just like you. And here are some of the ways that this stuff shows up. That experience that you can share is really how it normalizes and validates that audience. So first, I'll say, and I've got them on a shelf out of reach, or I should have pulled them down sooner. But I have both Hold Me Tight and Creative for Connection. Have you read either book? If you haven't, I would say it is a great place to start. You could be EFT trained, which is great. Definitely something that will impact your ability to present the content. But the way that Sue lays out the EFT material in the book is different than how you learn it as a therapist who's going to work with clients. She lays out 7 conversations. The first conversation, and I'll get into this in the content in a little bit, she calls them the demon dialogues. And this is cycle work. If you're an EFT therapist, you know cycle work. There's pursuers and withdrawers, and their cycle, comes up and really gets them into distress on a regular basis. In Hold Me Tight and Creative for Connection, she's walking them into how to articulate the cycle that they get into. The reason I love these workshops, and we call them workshops more than conferences because the couples are doing work. The reason I love these workshops is because it gives couples words to the psych ed part that you don't always have time to teach. You don't have time to teach in the session. So in the sessions, we're not telling them what the moves are. In the workshop, we're telling them what the moves are. We're helping them understand a little bit of the framework of attachment and why and how they fight. And I'll get into the content a little bit more, but either way to say it's worth it if you're interested in this to take time to read one of the books, whichever is that more suits the population that you're going to serve. Get it on audiobook. They're great. I strongly recommend either one. I also recommend attend a workshop. There's enough of these all over. Take a little trip with your spouse or your partner and go to one of these so that you can experience it. If you're not in a relationship, that's okay. You still want to help marriages, but you're not currently in a romantic relationship. Go and volunteer to facilitate at one. We get therapists all the time who come to ours, and they help us facilitate, and I'll explain what they do along the way. But more than anything, they learn how to host it and understand a little bit more of how the material lands in the room. So I would say that gives you a little bit of kind of boots on the ground learning on how you're going to facilitate this and what you're going to be presenting. Like I said, if you have additional EFT training, that's great. You can sometimes give a little bit more insight. The challenge with this is sometimes then you can decide you want to share too much information. And what's too much information? It's hard to say, but the truth is none of these couples need to know the extent of an EFT intervention pack like you do. You're the therapist working with couples. They're not. They just want to learn how to say, I'm sorry, and have a nice night with their spouse. So you have to really start to kind of gauge how much is too much. What do they need to know that's helpful for them? And not necessarily all of it. Now, my husband did his dissertation on this, so he always in the presentation likes to talk about John Bowlby and Shaver and attachment theory and the strange experiment. And so we have to like whittle that down just to like hey, if you like to geek out on stats and content, feel free to go read Chad's dry dissertation. It's great and packed with all that information. But the sooner we can get couples into their own story and their own narrative and their own fights and their own distress, the more that they get into that felt sense sooner. And that's what you want to do. I'll always say this too. What other resources do you know about that you have tried? I encourage you never to share a resource with your group or your couples that you haven't tried. So intensives, I say that's a little bit different because not all of us have been in an intensive, but to really help them understand what an intensive would do for them. A podcast, if you haven't listened to at least 2 or 3 episodes of a podcast, I wouldn't recommend sharing it, and I'll share some resources later. Same with a book. There's a lot of great books out there. There's also a lot of books that aren't so great out there that won't help a couple that's in distress. And so just really understanding the resources that you're giving is going to be important. All right, so I'm going to open the floor up for a question as we dive into the logistics part here, and that is your why. right? Why do you want to host a couples workshop? And I want to say, by the way, absolutely no judgment for any of the reasons. All the reasons are good. If it's, I want to make money, that's fine. I don't care. That's a great reason. Do it. If it's the mission, which is more Chad and I, we both have jobs with salaries and feel blessed in our lives. And so I think we offer like one of the cheapest ones in the country. We get emails sometimes from people mad at us for offering it at a at a lower rate. And so just so you know, this is really from you. I want to hear from just a few of you. When you saw a webinar come up that was like, do you want to host or facilitate a marriage workshop? What was it in your heart, head, or body experience that made you go, this is something that I want to learn more about or do? So I'm going to stop sharing and open the floor up for anybody. And you can just unmute yourself. You don't have to raise your hand. And if I see some unmuting, I'll try to do a shout out. Who's willing to say, what's your why? Why do you want to know about these? Why do you want to host one? By the way, I talk fast. My Instagram handle is Angela Talks a Lot. Andrew, I see you.
Chime in, Angela.
Okay, and then we'll come over to Andrew when I see Lana. Is that you, Lana, talking?
Actually, my name's Melora
Oh,
Moore.
Melora on page 1. Okay, go for it.
Hey, I'm in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and I got to be a helper at a Hold Me Tight about a little over a year ago, and I was just in awe of the opportunity to take what we do with couples, and sometimes it spreads over a longer period of time, and maybe trying to fast track some of this stuff in a retreat, a couple days. So that they can maybe grasp their cycles sooner, grasp some other concepts within their relationship, and it, really could be a catalyst for
Yeah.
more for them relationally.
Welcome, Melora. I love that insight. And you used a word I want to make a distinction on, retreat. This is a great word because so many times in the way we advertise what we're going to do, we want to tell them a little bit more about it. And so when we go to Orlando, we've gone a few times down to a community down there and they have a retreat. And it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning. And they build space into every day for their couples to have a little date time, a little downtime. It definitely is. They are from Tampa, but they go to Orlando. They retreat to another location, and it is a refreshing and restorative thing. Important if that's what you want to make sure you build that in. Chad and I, when we do these, we call them workshop intensives. We start Friday night at 5:30. We go for 3.5 hours. We come back at 8:30 the next day. We go for 8 hours. By the time they're done and we're done, you can't feel your face most of the time. It's an intensive, and it's crazy to think, but this is the goal. That conversation for the Hold Me Tight conversation, you're actually asking them to go into their vulnerability, identify what their need is in their deepest fear, share it, and ask for the need to be met. Anybody know, just off the top of your head, what step and stage that is in the EFT process? Anybody willing to shout out? That's stage 2 work. That's a step 5, 6, and 7. In 10 hours, we're asking couples to acknowledge their fights, recognize that they're a pursuer or withdrawer, do forgiveness work, identify past trauma in a raw spot, and then do a 5, 6, 7. It's maddening. And we know that, and I'll talk to you a little bit more in the content part, that there is a distinction between a workshop and a retreat. So I love, Melora, even your heart saying, want to give them a place where they can go, and knowing what you want to build is key here. Just like in EFT, as the therapist, you are the vessel that is delivering the content. It's going to be the same with what you want to host. If you want a more retreat-like setting, building that in is important and possible. If you want to do more of an intensive, which is what Chad and I do, also an option. I know somebody up in Chicago who not only he does a 2 long days, so you take Friday off and you do all day Friday, all day Saturday, and then every couple that comes, and he caps it at 10 couples, also gets an hour-and-a-half session. And so you can do these all kinds of different ways. And so we're going to discuss some of those ways. So thank you, Melora. Katie, I saw you unmuted, and then I'll jump over to the other page and get the few others who I saw. What do you got?
I would love to be able to provide support for couples who maybe don't have the time or the like financial resources to come in and commit to therapy. I'd love to just
I
read
love it.
through.
This is this is one of the missions Chad and I do. We know a lot of people in our area who are under resourced or don't have the finances to go to start therapy, or don't have insurance to cover it, or don't have a means to pay. And so if we can offer an intensive weekend that gets them what is the equivalent to like 3 to 6 months down the road, and they can identify and articulate some of the reasons they're distressed at a low cost in a 2-day thing, even getting childcare seems hard, but is easier in a 24-hour period than every single week to try to get childcare. And so that is something that we like to try to encompass as well, to be able to reach a population that potentially can't go to therapy. And this is a great resource for them. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, Lana, and then I did think I saw somebody else on page 2, but now he's gone away. So you'll have to tell me. Lana, what'd you have?
I always find like by the time they get to us, they're really escalated. So I thought, hold me tight would be, if we could just do more of that, really help. That's basically what I want.
It's such a great thought. We've discussed, so Ryan, Raina, Chad Umhoff, and James Hawkins all practice at the same agency right here in Northwest Arkansas is where we are. And we have hallway conversations all the time about how great it would be if a couple calls in and says, I want to get into therapy, to say, do a workshop first, and then come in with some clarity around where you're distressed. I mean, that's not always possible, but absolutely. I'll talk about this a little bit in a few more minutes in the logistics part about who you're promoting your workshops to, or your conferences to, or your retreats to. Is it people who are in therapy? Is it a targeted community? These are things that you want to think through. And so where we are, we have a lot of agencies, and we will let the therapist know, if you have a couple that you think could benefit from this, that's already in EFT therapy, and they just need a little bit of the psych ed, send them to our conference. And so we get a mixed group when we have these, of people who have been in therapy, already have a EFT therapist, and it's awesome. They already even know, maybe they're the pursuer or withdrawer, and then they get different content. It's interesting for us when we pitch it, we'll say, if you are already a secure couple, this is an enrichment. It's going to give you words to articulate more about your relationship. And if you're a distressed couple, and this might be your Hail Mary pass into the end zone, last ditch effort, this is going to help you understand why you're stuck, and maybe why you've been cycling and having so much distress. So it's a variety, a continuum of where couples are on the map that you can invite them in, and know that you'll be able to reach an array of couples. Okay, let's see. I wanted to say there was a Kyle, but then I lost him.
Andrew?
Okay, yep, go ahead.
So about a year ago, I went to a Hold Me Tight with my wife just to really experience it. And we're doing pretty well in our relationship, but we got to have some really hard conversations towards the end that we got stuck in, and we got some help with. So that was great. And then a few months later, I got to help facilitate a Hold Me Tight. And, the reason I do what I do is just because of the impact that it makes on people. And you could just see that all over. All of those couples were impacted, and it was just an amazing experience. So I want to just keep that going.
Thank you, Andrew. And by the way, thanks for doing your own work. I always encourage people, man, you could be trying to get couples to do enactments all day long, and then you go to one of these, and as soon as the facilitator or the host says, now turn to your partner and have this conversation, you go, oh, this is really harder than I thought it was, to have to go into those conversations yourself. And so I appreciate that. It is quite an experience if you choose to go as a participant, and I strongly recommend that you do, especially if you want to host one. Go find one somewhere. I'll have therapists come from other areas because they don't want to go to one in their area because their clients might be there, which is totally fine. You can come here or go. There's lots to choose from, but you get to experience it yourself, and that gives you a little bit more insight on maybe what you want to host and how you want to lay it out. So thanks for that. All right, let's keep going, and I'll open the floor up a couple more times as we continue. I think I'm on logistics. Let me click on that one. So why? The second part I want you to consider is your who. What's the population you hope to serve or that you think you can reach. We talked a little bit about this just with a few of the comments that came forward. So I would always like to say, start with where your influence is. Okay, so for Chad and I already had influence because I have been in the 12-step community here in our area for going on 18 years now. And so it was very easy for us to kind of cast a net into that group. Also, Chad is a therapist, a marriage therapist in the area. And so he already had a reach there. And so for us, it made sense to start with where we already have influence. But I've had conversations with people around the country in different areas that want to serve specific populations. This is something that Chad and I are in the process, haven't materialized it yet, but I'm a registered Choctaw Indian, and we go back to Tashkoma, Oklahoma every year, and I've been bringing our daughter to the Labor Day festival there and trying to get involved in serving some of the population of Choctaw there. And I told Chad, I'm like, in the next year or two, I want to host for Choctaw couples a free marriage seminar. And so that's something where I go, that's a population where I can give back even to a little bit of my heritage to couples that are in that community, and something I would like to do. So you can target a specific location. I had another person that I talked to who has a retirement community and sees a lot of people there who are working on second marriages or grieving the loss of a first, or couples who have been in it a long time and are feeling disconnected from adult children and grandchildren. And she wanted to do something for them. And we talked through the logistics of doing a Hold Me Tight for couples that have been married 50 years. And I'm like, that's awesome. We had a couple at our last Hold Me Tight that had been married 56 years. And I'm like, kudos to you guys for coming. And they're like, we've been to a lot of marriage retreats and none of them were like this. And I'm like, everybody needs to know why they fight and why they get into stress. So understanding your who, you might not have that targeted. It might just be couples in the area. Totally fine. As you continue to do these or entertain the idea of doing them, the who helps you know how to market. So let's talk about a little bit of the where, the promotion, the registration. So location is a tricky thing sometimes. You obviously want to have a room that can host couples. The benefit of a faith community, which I think we've taken advantage of, is in a good way, is that a lot of churches are willing to give you the space for free because they want to invest in their in their marriages and in their couples. I've walked a person through hosting one at the library, and the library actually donated the space. They said they were mental health and investing in families in the community, and the library said, this is a great cause, let's do it. So I would encourage you to try to look for locations where you can host it for free. Some agencies that you might work at have a conference space, that's fine. You want to try to keep costs down there, that's something that you can do. But I've also seen, especially the one we go to in Orlando, they go to a 4-star hotel and the price is worked into, they have spas and pools and it's a whole big actual retreat, and the couples know that the cost of the retreat includes the full experience of a nice hotel, and in that case there's a huge ballroom where they host the couples. And so really trying to think through, what do I need and where is the location? You start to try to play out the specific details of putting this on. It's not just what am I going to say once I'm up there. You have to figure out how you're going to get them there. Do they understand what they're coming to? What's the cost to you to run it, and how much do you need to charge so that you can recoup the cost in time? So then also promoting. How do you promote it? Is it for the library one? I kind of walked her through, and I'll talk about how to maybe do some flyers and stuff like that, but walked her through making a flyer that was put on the library bulletin board, and it was up there, and the library even helped her promote it. And so that's an option. Obviously, depending on the people group that you're wanting to reach or target, you're going to want to advertise in different ways. I already mentioned for us, we share it with the local couples counselors in this area, and they will share it with couples that they know. I mean, for us, I feel blessed that we're now 6 years in and we host 6 a year. And so we're now at that point. I can't tell you exactly where that is. It might probably about 3 years is where we had kind of this shift where we don't have to hustle as much. People anticipate them coming, or they already know us in this area, and so it just gets promoted a little bit easier. So if this is something you're in for the long game, you can start to build a reputation in your community for hosting one in the spring, one in the fall, or different ones. I know there's a couple we've connected with who host them in Baton Rouge, and they host about 4 a year, and I think they call them lasting connections, or I can't remember exactly the title that they use, but they're workshops and they use the Hold Me Tight material, and they host 4 a year, and their people in their area know that they're coming, and we got put on their mailing list, so we get some of their advertisements sometimes, and they have developed a reputation in their community of hosting them. And so now the promotion starts to become a little bit easier. And then registration. So this is something that I just wanted to come up, and I'll come back. So these are just 2 flyers that Chad and I have made, created for Connection, and I'll go on Canva and make these. Canva is a pretty user-friendly site. You throw in some photos and add, you can even do a QR code generator to create a flyer, put them in JPEG or PNG form so you can share them on socials or print them off for agencies. We use Eventbrite. There's a lot of different options. In the early days before we did Eventbrite, we had a Square app that we plugged in, and we would run it when people showed up, or we took a check. I mean, all the ways. So you have to kind of decide if you want to host the registration yourself. I worked with somebody, and their agency was the one kind of hosting it, and then she was getting a speaker fee. That happens for us sometimes when we go to an outside area, when we get hosted by somebody, or the one in Orlando, we are their keynote speaker. So we come in and are the speakers, but they run all the logistics, the registration, all the parts that we don't have to. And we've done both. We have been the people who, I still do a Sam's run before our conferences and pick up bottles of water and crackers and snacks, and I'm setting up the tables and doing those parts of it. As we grow, we get helpers to help us along. But if you've never done one before, trying to help you understand the logistical part that it's going to take you to kind of get this ball rolling and get you going in a direction of being consistent with them and what you might need to think of going forward. So registration. I want to talk a little bit about the number of people in the room. This is just for Chad and I. We feel pretty confident that we can hold, if that's the right word I want to use, 15 couples in the room. We can hold the emotional space. We push ourselves when we get to 20. Over 25, there's something that shifts. When we're doing the conversation on forgiveness and you've got 25 people in the room, or 25 couples in the room, that's 50 people in the room, and they're going deep into conversations on forgiveness, and we have them turn and talk to each other, you can feel the room kind of sink. And so anytime we get over 15, we get helpers to come and help us facilitate. And so this last time we should have capped it at like 25, and we didn't. And so then we got to 30, and then we got over 30. And I realized after the fact, it was harder to hold the emotional space in the room. So you have to think, who is the facilitator? Is it you and a work partner? Is it you and your spouse? Is it who you're doing it with? And it could be, we go to one in Fort Smith, about an hour south of us, and it's 3 therapists, and they kind of share the load of teaching and show videos for the couples. And so the 3 of them have a capacity to hold the emotional space in the room, but they cap it at about 20. And so when you're thinking about registration, that's just something for you to think about. Part of my process of wanting to host this was to help you maybe think about things you hadn't thought of, thinking like, what will it require for me to hold the space in the room, and how many do I think I can hold at one time? Money. And then after these 2, I'm going to open it back up for questions. Money. Let's talk about the cost and the price. I think I already mentioned up in Chicago, there's a guy who has a 2-day, and it's, I think 6 or 7 hours both days. And in addition to that, every couple gets an hour and a half. with him. And I think he caps it at 10 couples. And the last I checked, I wanted to say it was like $2,200. In Orlando, we go to that one that's a retreat. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They're at a 4-star hotel with all the bells and whistles. I think that a meal is included, but they do a lot of breakouts, and I don't know exactly how that is, but I think that one's like $2,500. Don't be mad when I tell you, Chad and I, Friday night and Saturday for our weekend intensive, we charge $250. Don't be mad. You can charge way more than that if you want to. That's just what we charge, and we're fine with that. As a matter of fact, we only about a fourth of the couples who come pay $250. Most of them ask for the discount scholarships that we offer. And so we give, if somebody requests a scholarship, that is all that is required for us to offer a scholarship. If you say, I need one, you get one. And so I'll go back and say, you can have a 25% off, 50% off, or 75% off. I don't ask questions. Tell me what amount works for your budget, and I'll send you a code for your registration. You can come at that price. So we have one coming up at the end of the month. I have a couple couples coming for $62, a couple couples coming for $125, a couple couples coming for $180, a few couples at $250. Yesterday, I had a couple register $250 and they said, hey, we've already been to your conference twice and we're not coming. Please apply that for a couple who needs a scholarship. Every time that happens, I just am overwhelmed with how sweet it is that people want to give back. And so for us, it works. We're local. We're sleeping in our own bed on the Friday night. We don't have to travel. It's a pretty easy event for us because we've run enough of them that's our cost. But I do want you to consider the cost and what you think you could need to charge in order for you to feel like it was a value or worth it for you to do it. The long-term investment, I would say, I don't know if you're building your practice. Chad and I have wait lists and don't have the capacity to take on more couples. So we always say we don't host these because we can see any of you, but if you need a referral, we have lots of therapist friends we can refer you to. But maybe you're in a practice building mode. This is a great place to have that initial contact. And I don't know the ethical requirements in all the states, but if you're a therapist running one and your first point of contact with them is as a licensed professional and they're a couple coming to do work, and then they would become your client, that from my understanding, that's not a dual relationship. It's not like you're in community with them. And so that's something that you could do. But I would strongly recommend if you find out what your exact requirements are there, if they know you. Sometimes come into your conference first can help build that, or you can, it's part of kind of what that therapeutic process is. So a lot of times that's not a violation. Okay, details. This is kind of crazy, but just over the course of time, and make a mental note for this. And what I can possibly do is even send to the St. Louis community an outline so you can have this if you need it, or we'll have this video recording and you can see, and I'll attach the slides to it. But these are little crazy specifics. The first few conferences we ran, we didn't have Kleenex because I didn't think about it. And we midday on the second day sent somebody to Walgreens to get Kleenex because the couples are crying. You're going to get them into their stuff, have Kleenex. It never fails, no matter where we are. Any state we go to, even in our own space, room temperature for couples is crazy different. Some people get really cold, some people get really hot. So what we do is we keep the room chilly and we tell people to bring sweatshirts and blankets, or cardigan sweaters or sweatshirts. I know that sounds like a really weird thing to do, but in the note that I send to couples who are registered the week before, I will say, if you're somebody who gets cold, make sure you bring a jacket because sometimes the room is chilly. Crazy little detail. But if somebody is in a room and they're freezing and uncomfortable, it's going to be harder for them to tune into what you're saying and harder for them to connect with their partner. And so trying to keep everybody at a comfortable temperature. Seating preferences. Chad and I prefer one couple at one table. We actually got tables at Sam's that are like the 18-inch by 6-foot tables. We have 20 of those. One of the other ministries in our church has 20 more. And so we borrow those tables, and anywhere we go that's within our local area, those are the tables we use. If we go to a location, we'll ask them to only have 2 people or 1 couple per table. One event we did in Oklahoma, they had big round tables and there was 2 on each side of the round table, which kind of worked, still not our favorite. We'd like to create privacy for them to have that conversation. We've done one where it was a little bit different. I'll explain why in a minute. There were 50 couples, and it was like just a pursuer withdrawer intensive 2-hour talk. And we had 2 chairs with a little stool with a thing in the middle, and that they had like little vignettes of space. So you want to give them a little bit of privacy. The goal is not to put a whole bunch of people in the same space where they're now thinking about who's within earshot of them. So that is a whole bunch of crazy logistics that I just shared with you. And so I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a second and open the floor back up. And my question is, what did you not think about that you just learned? And what now have I provoked even more questions that you might have about logistics and how we can host these? We're about to get into content, but before we even get to the content, you got to set all the other stuff up. So raise your hand. I didn't do that last time, but what that will do, it'll bring you to my front page. And then I won't have to track you down if you unmute yourself. So raise your hand and then you can come to the front. Any other logistical questions that I didn't cover or that you want more details on? Wendy, go for it.
Yeah, I'm just curious, do you have like a ratio of, like I know you talked about like 15 participants or 20 participants, do you kind of have a ratio like 1 therapist per 4 couples, 5 couples? Can you kind of nail it down a little bit?
It's a great question. When Chad was doing his dissertation and we first started, we capped it at 14. We both felt that we could handle 7 each. I know that sounds like we just put that arbitrary number out there, and it actually was good. We could. We also had a few therapists who were interested in the process who came to help. And so when we're up front presenting the content, and I'll talk about this in a second when we go into content, we're just talking to them and you don't need to hold much. You can read the room and get head nods. And I'll talk about this too, when to ask questions, when you're losing the room, that kind of thing. It's when you send them into the conversations that you got to really know what you're getting into. And so, is Jennifer still here? I don't know if she went to a second page. Jennifer is one of our couples who has been to ours, and I invited her this today because she's one of our facilitators, not a therapist, just a couple who's been through enough times that she's now one of our mentor couples. I'll ask her if she comes back in. I don't see her right now. Because I wanted to ask her as well, the difference in what it felt like when we had 30 in the room versus when we had 15. If you've never done it before, I would say maybe start with 5 per facilitator, maybe 6 or 7, and then see how it felt for you. We had one, for whatever reason, it's different every time, but we had one where in the conversation about sex, we had a lot of questions about pornography, and you could tell multiple people in the room had either a conversation going or there was some sort of involvement with pornography in the room, and it shifted the room to the point that we paused, came back to the front, pulled them out of the conversation, and did a little triage on kind of like an attachment injury repair work on, hey, let's bring you all back. We know that you're struggling. And if we need to triage you or refer you to therapy, fine. Let's keep the conversation here. Don't go here. And so here's what I want to say. Practice and experience in hosting these is going to exercise your muscle. The first few that we did, the next day we were exhausted. I mean, like, I think I took like a 4-hour nap the next day. Now we do them and it's just like a Tuesday. Like we've done them enough that our muscle to hold the emotional space in the room is stronger. And so start with a smaller amount. And that's even why I want to come back to that money thing. Know that down the road, like a very Kevin Costner Field of Dreams kind of way, if you build it, they will come. Your first few you might not sell out. You might not have dozens of couples, but if you get 8 couples there and you impact 8 couples, those 8 couples are going to talk. People go out and they tell their friends, oh my gosh, I just did this thing. And now and now you host another one and it grows and your capacity grows as well. So Wendy, I don't know if that, That's a very lucid answer.
No, very helpful.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Aaron, what do you got? Oh, unmute yourself. Go. Okay, good.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed my name. But so I'm curious about like logistics wise for couples and resources. Like, do you print out like a notebook like for them, or you give them like digital format to kind of follow along with like the presentation? Just curious about like that aspect
Yeah,
of it.
yeah. Great question. Let me go here to answer it. So this is something we've gone back and forth with. The first few that we did, I printed out the PowerPoint and I did this little like, this, you know, the PowerPoint you can print out that has like 3 lines on the side or something like that. Like we did that. And then I found that the PowerPoint was so small, they couldn't always see the words. And so then we played around with a whole bunch. Now what we do is a handout. And so you'll see those top 2. This is just an example, the demon dialogues. So we have a PowerPoint up there and we're discussing Find the Bad Guy, the protest polka, what the demon dialogues are. And we just create a little handout that has pages where they can kind of fill in. And I always joke at the beginning. I say, what everyone in here, there's 2 kinds of people in every couple. One of you is a note taker. The other one doesn't care about the notes. And so these handouts are for you, the note taker, and the other one, just push it aside. Your partner's going to take enough notes for both of you. And I'll just kind of make a joke about that. And sure enough, you'll see like half the room taking notes and the other half not. But I wanted to show you 2 pieces. The one on the right is conversation 3, revisiting a rocky moment. And so when it's time for them to do that conversation, everybody turns to that page and they follow along in what that says. Now, I'm going to come back to this really quickly, and you can get the Hold Me Tight or the Creative for Connection Facilitators Guide on the ICEF website. I think somebody already posted in the comments, but you can find it there. And so in this incredible resource, which I think now is downloadable, but when we first got it, there's a lovely disc there. I don't even think I have a computer that could take that disc, but at any rate, there it is. And it gives you all the conversations. So here in this little facilitator's book, if I can hold it up so you can see, it's reviewing a rocky moment. And what I did was I just took this and I put it into a Word document into our handout, and it's what I hand out. We have, over the course of our 35 that we've done, we've adapted it a little bit because we word things slightly different sometimes. And this is what I want to say about that, how true to the material you have to be. Just like in therapy, you're the vessel. So how you're going to set up an enactment is different than how I'm going to set up an enactment. And so the concept is reviewing a rocky moment. You want that couple to consider the fight they had and the part they played. How you deliver that is going to be different than how I deliver it. And so use yourself. You are your best tool. Use yourself in that process. And so we have, over the course of our growth, shifted, and now we do a handout that's a Word document instead of the PowerPoint slides. I still will get people with their phones out taking picture of the PowerPoint. And when I see that, I'll say, hey, everything on this slide is actually on page 4 of your handout. It just looks different, you know. But people like pictures of the PowerPoint. So either way, does that answer your question? And I've gone into what I just shared there at the bottom, showed like a little map. This is what we tell couples, that we're gonna help you find out where you are on the map, and we're gonna tell you where you could go. And I joke and say there's a little town over here like Pleasantville or Happy Town, and it's possible for you to get there, but your car or your vehicle could be stranded on the side of exit 3 and you never made it even on the highway. And what we're going to do is help you understand why you're stuck where you are and help you get your vehicle back on the road so you can move yourself towards where you want to go. You might not even want to go to Happy Town. You just might want a working vehicle. That's our goal, is to help you articulate where you're stuck. So I have a slide that I made on Canva that has a picture of a map on it. And I encourage you to create your own, use your creativity, create your own slides, or just have a handout, also just fine. Does that answer your question? Thanks, Darren. Okay, Gretchen, what do you got?
I just wondered real quick in small town America, how you handle confidentiality, like if people run into each other at these places.
So this is what I like to say. There's a few workshops, and I think, okay, so back to the facilitator's guide for the Created for Connection. This is different than Hold Me Tight, but in the Created for Connections, they might have suggested in the Hold Me Tight. I have, it's been quite a while since I've looked at that facilitator's guide. They actually had an option for you to do a group discussion where you take a group of the couples and ask them how they're processing it. We don't do that. We keep everyone in their own space and we do a group discussion from the front. So Chad and I will say, how did you guys handle that conversation? And the ones who want to be vocal can, and the ones who don't have to. And so keeping in mind that everyone's still facing the front, this is what I say. Marriage retreats and workshops, they're not sessions. So anonymity first is not required. I know that seems like a weird thing, but they're all going to see each other. And by the way, we're not out like fronting who's there. I'm not putting anybody's name out there, but people are going to see each other all the time. We keep people at their own table. And so what they discuss is their own. They're not, no one else, the way we put it, will have music on in the background. No one else is hearing their conversation. Now, somebody within 3 feet of them might, but usually the couples don't. And we even encourage, well, couples will go out into the lobby or they'll kind of spread out in some of the more private conversations. And so confidentiality is maintained because you're not hearing what they're saying. And if we ask a question from the front and they want to volunteer that, they can, and that's their own choice to be a little bit more vulnerable with their content. We have couples name their cycle. And so this is a fun time for us when we're like, what'd you name it? And somebody will be like, Jumanji, because it's quiet and then there's elephants running through the room, or, you know, whatever. They always come up with fun, creative names. And so then that's a fun way for them to connect with each other. But the content is usually kept confidential because they're in their own space. Does that make sense? Perfect. And then this is a thing that I encourage. This is me having been in 12-step and been a recovery pastor for 12 years. I tell everybody I and me statements wins. So don't share your partner's experience. Don't share anyone else's experience. Use I and me statements. How is this hitting you? What do you want to share about what you're learning about this content? And you always will get, we have always gotten, you know, that withdrawer who says, I'm noticing that my pursuer actually cares, and that's why he or she is sometimes critical or angry, or the pursuer goes, I'm realizing that my withdrawer is actually thinking about it. I just thought they were withholding information from me and not talking. You know, like you get this insight that is so normalizing and validating for everybody else in the room that it's not specific confidential content that only applies to one. Usually the content that is shared is more broad reaching and generic, if that makes sense. Now, when we break into conversations and we have facilitators that walk around, and I see now Jennifer is in here, and Jennifer is one of our, raise your hand so you can kind of pop to the front, Jennifer. I want to pull you in for just a second. Jennifer and her husband, we found them a couple years ago. They came to one of our conferences and then they were like, we love this. Can we help? And so then they started just showing up and helping us set it up. And we now rely on their help because they're such great facilitators. But they actually walk around when we have conversations and help us hold the space. And so Jennifer will, let's say, be talking to a couple, and most of the time we tell our facilitators, you're not doing therapy on them. You're just trying to triage them and keep them in the conversation. If we're reviewing a rocky moment, for example, conversation 3, we're trying to have couples discuss how they could approach a fight differently based on their own content. We're not asking them to queue up their last fight. That doesn't mean that 8 out of the 10 couples don't queue up their last fight. A lot of them do. And so what we will do is have our facilitators go around and triage and make sure people are staying in it. And so we've kind of trained them. And so I'll check in with Jennifer after, like, hey, read the room. Do any couples need Chad and I to go by? Or any couples dysregulated to the point that they can't take in the content, and we use them to kind of be our eyes as well. And so in that sense, I want to say, is that a breach of confidentiality? No, we're asking her to kind of help us assess so that we can come in and triage and they understand confidentiality as well, and kind of for the sake of it. So Gretchen, I hope that kind of makes sense. I might be creating more questions than answers in this process. Jennifer, you got anything else you want to kind of add to that process? You can unmute yourself and talk if you want. I'm going to put her on the spot. She doesn't always.
Oh, sorry, I dropped my phone when you asked me a question earlier.
Oh, okay.
I apologize. Yeah, I to answer the question earlier, I would just encourage the therapist to make sure they have the space to hold the capacity. The last one we did, even with, I think you had 2 therapists in training there, and my husband and myself, you and Chad, and there were 30-something couples. And it did feel like it was, the emotional space was a lot more to manage. And so I just would encourage you to have appropriate help, and know what you can manage emotionally. So that's great. As far as assisting, it's nice to have the assistants in there, I think. From a facilitator perspective, if Angela and Chad need something, we're their go-to people to really help that out, or help them out. It helps conferences run smoother. It also equips us to be able to walk around and help facilitate conversations. So we have been through the EFT externship, we've been through EFT counseling, we've been through these conferences. So I think we're a little weird in that regard, but it's certainly, I can see where it's beneficial to Chad and Angela and ourselves for that matter.
That her and her husband Keith are such assets for us. I mean, this is crazy, but it could be like, we're out of 3x5 cards. Can you run to the copy room and get them? And they always just are humbly willing to help. And then they'll say too, they're multiple times in our conferences as facilitators, you always hear something different. I mean, and so they're still like learning and applying and able to connect with couples on a different level, because they're at the level of a couple to say, hey, my husband and I have done this too. We understand where you're at. That's normalizing, that's validating, that helps externalize that couple isn't the only one that's gone through it, but there's other people who have. And so just letting you know, you don't always have to only use therapists to help. You can use couples in your community, or couples who want to kind of give back, or even get the content again. In the early times, we would give discounts to couples who were willing to help us set up tables and chairs and the snack table. So there are ways that you can kind of get around being the only person that is doing it. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing, and we're going to keep going. Oh, did somebody else have something? Go ahead.
It's Tina.
Yeah.
When you say a triage, when you have to triage, are you saying that the couples are escalating
Yeah.
and you're trying to just like bring them back to the topic?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. And so I'm trying to think, when we get into so demon dialogues there's 3, right? So the first one is find the bad guy, that's the blame. The second one is the protest polka, pursue, withdraw. The third one is the freeze and flee. And it never fails that in that conversation you will discover couples that have been stuck in a freeze and flee for a really long time and are hopeless in realizing how desperate their relationship is. And so we start to, I want to say, lose them, where they're no longer in our content. They're now in their head about where this relationship went wrong. And so when we walk around the room, you can just see it. You can see a couple where they're turned against each other. One's crying the whole time. You know, like you just kind of get, I want to say good at it, but like your capacity to attune and read the room is more acute than you think. And you can see a couple that's like, yeah, they're getting it. They're laughing. They're engaged in the conversation. And then a couple that every time you say, now it's time to have a conversation, one of the partners goes to the bathroom or the snack table and they avoid the conversation. So we try to get involved in all of those couples. And so I think somebody in the chat said, how do you facilitate the conversations? I think the question was, when we say, we're going to now send you all, and I'm pretending you guys, let's just pretend you guys are all the couples. So So Chad and I have just showed you what the demon dialogues are, and now we want you to consider possibly if you're the pursuer or withdrawer. So we're going to give you 15 minutes for this first conversation. What we want you to do is review the conversation that we have, and on the column on the left it's pursuer tendencies, and the column on the right it's withdrawer tendencies. We want you to take 3 to 5 minutes on your own and figure out which one you are, and then we want you to have a conversation with your partner about which one you are. Now, just a reminder, couples, you don't have to tell your partner which one they are. You're here to talk about yourself. So what we want you to do is see if you can turn and have a conversation, and we're going to turn some music on and walk around the room if you need help. And so that starts our first conversation. Music goes up. We engage in the couples out there along with our facilitators, and we start walking around. From the beginning, we'll have a couple be like, their hands go up and we go to them. We don't know what we are. We think we're both fighters. Like you just never know what you're going to get, right? Or you have a couple that, one is crying and they're not talking. And I'll come up and say, hey, how's this landing on you? Can I help you with anything? And you'll slowly recognize that they're in a really hard place. And so that, Tina, answering your question, that's what I'm triaging. Like, I'm so glad that you guys had the courage to come here. Pursuer, escalated pursuer, burnt out pursuer. You might feel hopeless, like your partner's not here, but you just convinced your partner to come to a workshop and they're listening to this content. So that lets me know that they're bought in more than you think they are. And the withdrawer will go, she gets me. She understands me. She just validated my existence. And then they kind of they turn a little, and then you just kind of see them start to engage the content. And so what we want to try to do is say, hey, I know you've got 10 or 15 or however many years that you've been married, coming to this one night, and it feels like a lot is riding on this conversation. And what we want you to do is set that aside for just a second, and let's just see if we can just do what this conversation's asking. Which one of you is a withdrawer and which one's a pursuer? I mean, based on the 30 seconds I've been with you, I'm going to say you're the anxious pursuer and you're the withdrawer. Is that accurate? And they'll be like, yeah. And I'll be like, great. We're already closer than we were when you got here. We're just trying to like validate them and get them to engage the process. So for me, that is what I'm calling a triage, where I'm like, I'm trying to catch them before the fight's on. I'm just trying to go, let's keep everybody at this level. And you'll get people that kind of sink below, but for the most part, we're trying to keep them present in the content. Tina, does that answer your question? All right, so now let's actually go into some of the content. Let's see, I'm going to share this again. That was the handout, and I'll come back to that in a second. Oops. Oh, I'm going the wrong way here. Content. Okay, I showed you that logistics. We use Canva and Eventbrite. There are so many great options out there, so don't feel like you have to. I just want to give you kind of some options. So content. Now that you have a room full of couples, and I've already now talked about some of this, but I'll go ahead and keep going. Where do you start and what do you do with them? So we follow the map and do a quick intro. And I already kind of showed you down at the bottom here, the goals of the seminar. We have a map and we explain to them, hey, wherever you are, we just want to help you articulate where you are. And you might say, we're better than we thought. And you might say, we have some stuff to work on. We want to help you articulate where you are and share your experience with your partner so that you feel seen and heard and that you guys can interact at a different level. So here are just some things for you guys today to think about. These couples are nervous. They don't know what to expect. We have couples, for us, when we host these, I'll send out an email to all our previous couples who have ever been before, and they get to come to our conference for $50. If you've been before, come back, go, and you get to only pay $50. Here's why. You are not as anxious as a cat. Sorry that cats get a bad rap for being anxious. You already know what to expect. And I'm going to put you at a table over there, and you and your partner are going to have conversations because you already know what we're going to ask of you. And those couples tend to just go deeper than they did the first time and can be left alone and don't require a lot of work. And so I encourage couples to come back and do this multiple times, and it never fails because their body already goes, I know what to expect. They even just start the workshop better. But these couples who have never been to this are like, what am I going to get into? And I don't know about my experience with Hold Me Tights, we've run 2, most of the ones we do, because where I work is in a faith community. That's the population we serve most of the time. I am always so sad about the number of retreats or marriage conferences that couples have gone to, bad on the faith community for just how unhealthy they've been for a really long time. But couples that have gone to really bad trainings, I'll get somebody that's like, we went to this one and they made us turn to each other and hold each other's face and look into each other's eyes and say blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, that's great if you're already securely connected. But if you're distressed and just had a fight, that's really hard to do. You got to like attune with your couples before you can get them to do that deep work. So all that to say, some couples come with past bad marriage conference trauma, and we have to earn their trust. Some couples come, they don't know what they're getting into, unfortunately for pursuers, and I'm one, so I can talk about myself this way. We talk our withdrawers into things, and so there's a lot of withdrawers there that felt talked into it, and they're not bought in. We got to earn their trust too. And so knowing that they're already nervous, which means their limbic systems are holding on from the moment they get there, ready to blow at any time you want to trigger them. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it's the truth. So we make it playful and fun, and we show some fun videos. Like there's one out there, and I can share these. I should have pulled them up to play, like what couples fight about. And it's a little couple that's fighting about how they fold the towels and whether or not they put the toilet paper roll on upwards or backwards, and that the one ate the other person's leftovers, or that they watch the Netflix series without them, or fun little things. We have a really fun sex video where they're not talking about sex. It's a dude dad one, and he's like, so are we going to eat some spaghetti? And she's like, we just ate spaghetti yesterday. And he's like, I have a big appetite for spaghetti. I could eat spaghetti twice a day. And like right into it that they're not talking about spaghetti. And it's really fun. And so we're taking these couples like in and out. We take them to those of you who already said you listen to James and Ryan, Leading Edge, like truly, we're taking them to the edge of what they can tolerate, and then we're bringing them back in. Chad and I, this is just how we facilitate. We tell jokes about ourselves, and we try to keep the room light. Now we're going to take you back to what the leading edge of what you can do, and then we're going to take you back out, and then we're going to take you back down. And so we're helping these couples have some emotional fluency, which is good for them to know they can go deep and come out and go deep and come out. And that actually is also building that strength in their relationship to be able to do that. And so knowing that, this is what we kind of recommend. We call it 20-20-20. And by the way, I'm going to pitch this to you, and then I'm going to be totally honest and tell you this is hard for us to do. So we explain the concept for 20 minutes, then we give a 20-minute example, and then we ask them to have a 20-minute conversation. Let me tell you what ends up happening. We talk about it for 30 minutes, explain it for 20 minutes, and give them 15 minutes because we run out of time, right? So the more you can have them in the conversation experiencing it, the more they're going to take away with. They're going to come away with what they experienced way more than they're going to come away with what you taught them. That's just how the EFT model works. It's an experiential model. If they can turn and have a vulnerable conversation or be seen or heard for the first time by their partner, that is going to impact them way more than me talking to them about attachment theory. So just something to shoot for. The sooner you get them into those conversations, the better. Read the room. Attunement is key. And you learn this. Oh gosh, like it's getting heavy in here. We need to bring them back up. And I already gave an example of that where we're like, hey, everybody, come out of the conversation for just a second. We're going to chat with you again, and then we'll send you back into the conversation. Do they need a break? Sometimes we'll be like, gosh, this talk was heavier than it has been at other ones. So let's give them an extra 5 minutes at this break. Go get water, stretch your legs, walk around. Do they need to pause and ask questions? If we're in content and we're not getting head nods and we're getting kind of glazed eyes, we pause and say, hey guys, how is this landing on you? Anybody have any questions? Give us some feedback. Where are you stuck? What questions do you have? And somebody will pop up with a question, and that'll get the room rolling again. So A quick chat about safety and dysregulation, confidentiality, anonymity. We already kind of talked about this because you guys had great questions that were leading right into this conversation. So again, we don't want to trigger them to the point that they're dysregulated. One of our very first ones, I'm going to say we were like 3 in, and we actually, if this is just fate or karma or God or however this worked out, we had a trauma therapist come as a facilitator. And in our raw spots conversation, and again, raw spots is conversation 2, where a couple starts to recognize that family of origin influence affected how they their attachment style and how they interact. And we had somebody get triggered by some past trauma that they had never shared with their partner, and they turned and shared it, and the partner got dysregulated, and we knew right away they weren't going to be able to go any further. And so we sent them into another room with that trauma therapist, and she worked with them for 2 hours, triaged them basically in a session, and they were able to finish the rest of the conference because that worked. That has happened one time in 35 conferences that we've hosted. So that is not the norm. That happened once, and we kind of figured out really quickly how to make sure that didn't happen again. But I did want to say that safety is important. If you have a couple that is having a really hard time with it, so hard that they cannot go forward, you can say, hey, this looks like it isn't landing on you well, or whatever, let's refer you to a therapist. And maybe let's not keep this, whatever conversation is triggering you, let's not keep that conversation going. Let's take that off so you guys can get, I'll say, a mediator or a therapist to help you, or whatever. We'll sidebar that and see if we can kind of bring them back. So most of the couples who are going to come to something like this already are a little bit better than a couple that is so far dysregulated that they're not even going to be able to connect in a capacity like this. And there is something about a social pressure. Everyone else in the room is having a conversation, and that puts a tiny bit of pressure on a couple that we leverage and say, everybody stay in your own conversation. We're all doing this together. We're all investing in our relationships. That normalizing and validating that everyone is having the same conversation. Everyone here has been influenced by their family of origin. You're not the only one. Kind of helps them stay in that process. So as far as the content goes, the facilitator guides, both the Creative for Connection one and the Hold Me Tight one, they are thorough. Sue and Kenny on this one did a phenomenal job of telling you how to talk about each conversation, 7 conversations, the demon dialogues, raw spots, rocky moment, and then you get into, so those 3 are about how fights break down. And then conversation 4, Hold Me Tight. And then you've got forgiveness and sex. And then you wrap up the conference with how to stay in love for a lifetime, or keeping your love alive. Maybe that's what that one is called. So you're going to talk to them about the concept. Hey, in this conversation, we're going to learn about raw spots. Raw spots are how your family of origin influenced you and how that now impacts how you interact with your couple or with your partner. And then you give a little bit of content. The book has it. Adapt it to your style. Chad and I, because we are a married couple, use our own examples. Now, I'm the pursuer and he's the withdrawer, so we always have to do a reference to what it might look like for a male pursuer and a female withdrawer. Male pursuers tend to not embrace the word anxious as much as female pursuers kind of go, yeah, it is an anxious pursuit. I tend to use different words for male pursuers, like there's a stoicism or a drive for efficiency, trying to know what words over time we've learned land, and just being able to validate either pursue. That's not gender specific. It's your attachment style, and trying to help them understand what their attachment style is. In the sex talk, we always say that sometimes you can flip. You could be a female pursuer emotionally and a sexual withdrawer. That when that flip happens in that cycle, it's incredible how much empathy it produces for the emotional role of the other. I understand what it's like to be an emotional withdrawer because I can understand what a sexual withdrawal feels like. And so being able to, over the course of us hosting these, you kind of find some of those nuances that you can teach on and feel a little bit different about. So utilize the material. You can go to ICEFT and find it, read the book, listen to it. There's lots of great content that'll help you frame what you want to teach. So try to teach like 20 or 30 minutes. Keep your teaching just brief. Here's the concept. Now that I've taught you the concept, here's how it shows up in a relationship. Now that you know how it shows up in a relationship, chat with your partner about how it might show up in yours. Do that 7 times. And that's the workshop. I know that makes it sound way easier than it is, but really that's what it is. And then you just do that on repeat 4 times a year and you guys will be crushing it. Okay, so let's open it up. Let me do the follow-up real quick and then we'll open it up. So follow-up, you've got a room full of couples, you've got them engaged, you've made it all the way through 7 conversations, but now the workshop is over. How are you going to keep them going? So I always encourage you to think about that before you ever get started. Have a resource page, QR codes that you can refer them to, whether it's a podcast, a therapy, book. We have even hosted, we need to do another one, a mini refresher. So what we did was after about our 10th one, we emailed all those couples and said, come back for a date night with your spouse, 1 night, 3 hours, and we're going to do a deep dive into pursuers and withdrawers. And we did what we called a Creative for Connection refresher on cycles. Then we did another one and it was on the sexual cycle. Come back and we're going to have and it was actually on the weekend of Valentine's Day. So we're like, get hot and heavy with your partner and let's talk about sexual cycles. And we had them come and it was 3 hours 1 night when we take all 3 hours and talk about one topic. So know that once you've earned their trust and got them talking and they know how you're invested in them, you can keep information going and help them stay plugged in. Here's some options. Chad and I have a podcast called Connecting Couples, and it's designed. When we started hosting these, people were like, do you guys have a podcast? Do you have more of this stuff? So we put a podcast together that's 20 minutes long. And then at the end, we have what we call a connect point, which is how we cue couples up to have a conversation. We encourage couples to listen together or to listen and then come back and have the conversation. It's one. Early on, I would say it was faith informed because that was our community. But the more we started hearing how we had a broad or more diverse population of listeners, it's just really more generic now. Here's some other ones. Secure Love, a great book for couples to read about how to help with their relationship. Foreplay Radio with Lori Watson and George Fowler. This is a sex podcast. Listen, I'm encouraging you to listen to a podcast before you refer it. I tend to not refer this to my Christian communities because they get really racy in some of their conversations. And I know the population that I serve wouldn't always feel comfortable with what they talk about. And so I will tell any Christian couple that I listen to, hey, this is a secular podcast. Read the title clearly before you listen to it so that you feel comfortable listening to it. And then everybody's an adult and they can listen as they choose. But just know your audience and know what you're referring them to. Make sure you've read or listened before you refer. Don't just refer on my basis telling you it's a good thing. Actually listen to it and see if it's good for yourself. So I kind of already said this, but how to start. I would recommend for your first one, invite 4 couples that you know and say, hey, would you do me a favor? I want to do a dry run of this. It's going to be a Friday night and Saturday. Not even going to charge you. I just need to go through the material, run it, and then let them give you feedback and let you have some practice doing one so that you know what that's like. Is that an investment in your time? Yes. But in the long run, it will be such a beneficial investment that you actually know what you're doing. Or I heard somebody else say already they went to one. If you've already gone to one, then you kind of already have some ideas of, oh, here's what I would do differently or the same or adjust because you've experienced it. That's the key. And then plan for growth. Know that, hold tight to why you want to do this, hold tight to your mission because they're going to get hard. Sometimes they're really smooth and sometimes they're really bumpy and we never know how they're going to go. We show up and give it our best shot and know that we're trying to influence couples at the end. So I'm going to open it up for more questions. I've got one little thing here. I don't know if I'll be able to go to this link, but I'm going to try. This is a Facebook group that I facilitate. I've just recently taken it over. Hold Me Tight and Creative for Connection Couples Workshop Facilitators Forum. It's a private group. And there's a slew of us in here. An incredible guy, James Reagan, actually set it up, and he has hosted these and really cares about impacting people in the community. And he's recently handed it off to me to host. And what we're trying to do is put together a place for all of us who want to host these to encourage each other. If you have one coming up, to share insight about it. A place to ask questions. Hey, I'm about to host one. Can somebody help me? And so I would love for you to find that page and join it. And I only recently changed the rules. I hope it works. If not, private message me and I'll try to get you in the group. Okay, I'm here for questions. Let me go to the chat and see, because I see there's already been some. Let's see. Intern. So glad you're here, intern. This is a great place to start. I would encourage you, volunteer to help somebody run one. Where can you obtain the kit? Great, on iCEFT. I think the link is there. Helpful to have the Hold Me Tight workbook. There is a facilitator's guide, and then there's a workbook. I wish I could say I had gone through the workbook. I probably should have before I hosted this. So just grab one and see if it's helpful. We put our own handout together. That's something De'Aaron asked about. So use the workbook if it's helpful to you. If not, I would say make it your own. That's totally fine. Barbara, so glad that you were able to help with one. That's super beneficial. Where can you register for the workshop with Chad and I? As a participant, you can go to our website, www.therealemhoffs.com. That'll tell you when we have the latest one. We have one coming up at the end of February. These are in person in Fayetteville, or just message me. I think we have a few spots left. But if you want to come to the area and help us facilitate, I won't even charge you. A lot of times if you're coming from another area, I won't charge you. I'll give you a code and come for free with your spouse. I give away all kinds of stuff for free. Don't hate me for it. But
Angela, correction there. Your conference is end of January, not February.
Oh, sorry, end of January. At the end of February, we're doing one in North Little Rock. And so we're doing two. We've got one at the end of January, and 3 weeks later, we have one in Little Rock. Then we have another one in May and in October, and we're working on one this summer, possibly in Florida. So message me, and if we also, FYI, we'll come to your area and help you run your first one and then hand off whatever. I want to empower you and help you any way that we possibly can to run these. And so come here and we'll walk you through it, or we'll come to you and help you host your first one, and then you can take it from there. Either way. Is holding the workshop online as effective? Not my preference. We had to during COVID, but it's not what I recommend. I recommend in-person ones. There might even be a rule against it now. I think iCEFT might have somebody look into that. I don't know, or we can get the information to you, where you're not allowed to do it online because iCEFT offers it or something. I need to find out that information before I speak as though I have a clue. But I recommend doing them in person, and you are allowed to do them in person wherever you are. Can one do this solo? Yes, one could do this solo. I would encourage, if you did it solo, to have 6 couples, maybe, as a max. Try not to have too many couples that you would have to host, and I would get helpers for sure. There's just so many things that come up in the process that I think it would be really hard for one person to hold it all. When you have so many couples, like 7 per facilitator, how do they attend to the conversations? I think I answered that earlier, but if you have more questions about that, Parmis, please do ask. I'd love to facilitate in Spanish. I do believe that Hold Me Tight has been translated into Spanish. I don't think Creative for Connection is. By the way, there's not that much difference one or the other. The Creative for Connection has some scriptures in it. And so the only reason we use the Creative for Connection material is because we do it in the faith community. And Chad and I talk a little bit about how God wants you to have a good connection. That's really all we're not talking about like theology or the Bible. All we're saying is, hey, you can love God and still hate your spouse and fight a lot, and that's okay. Let's talk about your fights. That's where we go with it. And so don't worry too much that the Christian one offers something that the Hold Me Tight one doesn't. All couples need help with where they fight, even the ones who love Jesus. So pray for them. Okay, I'd like to facilitate, let's see, any experiences doing these on weekdays. Curious if that's something people attend. Around the country, there are people who I know do them on Thursday and Friday, and people miss work for it. Yes, it does happen. It isn't the best for Chad and I in our community. We have talked about doing it before, but it typically isn't something that we do, that Friday night, Saturday one. Having said that, I did tell Chad I want to do one in the fall on a Thursday and Friday when people's kids are at school, but trying to get somebody to miss work to come to this might be harder. We'll give it a try and I'll get back to you. Thank you for asking that question. Is that John? John, I'll get back to you maybe if we try that. What's your opinion on spreading the workshop out over 6 sessions? Like I said earlier, they designed this to be done in an 8-week or 10-week time frame. So it could happen where you bring couples together. This is what Christian communities do. We have a potluck, we eat a meal, we watch the videos, have the conversations with each other. And so that's definitely something that has been done. The challenge, I think, is life happens to people over a course of 8 weeks. And so they'll miss one or they won't make it. And then you're trying to do makeup stuff and that gets a little bit trickier. And so we prefer that weekend intensive style, but make this your own. I encourage you, try the 6-week thing. Email me and let me know how it goes. I would love to hear feedback or join the forum Facebook group and share about it. I really think if you're thinking it, then there's an audience for it. You're not the only one. And so give it a try. And I hope that this group in the forum will be an encouraging group that empowers you and says, go for it. And if we can support in any way, we definitely will. Okay, let me keep going. It's Courtney. Oh, there. You are doing so great. Just wanted to make sure you save a couple minutes at the end. Oh, yeah. This was free. So you can go back to the link if you have found this beneficial and donate a couple bucks to the St. Louis EFT community. They're doing great things. And so if you want to do that, I would love for you to be able to support the EFT community in St. Louis. Also, let you know they have a couple of really great trainings coming up, including one with my husband, Chad Emhoff, and Dr. James Hawkins. They are doing a Self of the Therapist training. So if you're somebody who in therapy or in hosting one of these feels like sometimes you get dysregulated or you feel anxious or you sometimes don't know what to do, they have an incredible training where they help you basically how to do self-regulation in that professional context. And so go and check it out. Chad and James are incredible presenters. Also, James Hawkins lives across the street from us and they're our BFFs. So just so you know, it's a little thing there. Are there couples you don't take any sort of assessment filtering? We used to be more worried about this up front, and we would send an email out saying if there's active abuse or active affairs, or I think those were the two. We tend to not do it anymore. Really, those couples that are so dysregulated that they can't even interact with each other don't tend to come to these. I actually had a guy who was 24 hours sober, and his wife came to me on Wednesday, and it was a Hail Mary. She was talking to a divorce lawyer, and I said, hey, I don't know if his sobriety is going to hold, but if he's sober right now and he can stay sober till the weekend, why don't you guys come? And they came, and it was crazy. And he was probably like had the sweats the whole time. But after that, we got them into therapy, and I think they're like, 6 months sober and working on it, and then therapy. You just never know. If it's a resource that you can get into the hands of a couple that's struggling, try. But you could put a disclaimer in there. I think there is one in the back of this that says, very last page of the facilitator's guide, this program is not appropriate for use when there's explicit and obvious lack of commitment. So that is a contraindicator people don't often talk about, which is an alternate agenda. I don't really want to be here. It's hard for somebody to do this if they don't want to be here. And so usually if somebody's willing to show up at a conference, it lets me know they got a tiny bit of buy-in, not sure what that buy-in is. So it's up to you. We've done enough of these that Chad and I feel pretty confident that we can triage or hold some of the content that might come up. So maybe that is irresponsible of me to say that. Chad would say, definitely put the contraindicators out there and make sure nobody comes. So just know that's my Chad voice, and you should definitely ask that question. I'm like, let everybody come. Everybody needs a hug. That's just how I work. Okay, if you have to drop off, thank you so much for coming. I'm gonna keep answering questions because I can, and there are more. Let's see. Is this the workbook, or do you have to add your own creative? There is a work. This facilitator's guide, if you follow it, has everything that you need, including a PowerPoint involved, and you can use it and go right off of it and probably run a really great conference. The first 5 that we did, or 6 that we did, where we were taking a pre, mid, and post assessment for Chad's dissertation, we stuck to the letter because he had to make sure that we were assessing the same content given to all the couples. So for whatever those, statistics reasons are, we did exactly the same for all the couples. As we have done them after, we've adapted our own style and made some adjustments. And so there is room for growth as you feel more comfortable, but you could absolutely use what they have. How do you help people or prevent people from becoming dysregulated? You let them have an experience that they can do a repair. Everybody is going to fight. And we tell people up front, this conference we're not ever promising you that you will not fight again. You will fight again because couples fight and get dysregulated. What we are going to promise is that we can help you repair, and you're capable to be able to do a repair. So you can't keep them from becoming dysregulated, but you can help them articulate what's going on for them, be able to do a repair. In the conference specifically, if you're attuned to the room and you have helpers, just trying to remind the couples to stay present, not to go back into those fights. We tell them to write a note if they need to go back to content that would trigger them now, not to do that. So there's a couple little tricks that you can try to keep them present and in the moment. If you're not trained in EFT, where do you start this journey? It depends. If you're not a therapist and have no desire to be a therapist, read Hold Me Tight and Creative for Connection, whichever population you want to serve, and then go to a Hold Me Tight workshop and experience it. Those are 2 great ways to start. You can listen to Chad and I's podcast to start getting more familiar with it. You don't have to be EFT trained to be able to facilitate this. Is it helpful? Possibly, probably. But anybody can. You just have to be willing to kind of dig and do some work on your own to feel comfortable with the material. Here's the EFT community website, and the recording will be posted on that, and then also on Chad and I's The Real MHOFs. Our YouTube page is called The Real MHOFs, and so we'll post it on that. Give us a couple days for me to get it done, and also to kick it back to the St. Louis community, and you can find it there. And here's the Self of the Therapist, Core Skills, donation link. Use these links to be able to support. And thanks again to the St. Louis community. Can you put the link of the Facebook page and the name of the group again? I shared that. It's called the whole HMT Created for Connection Facilitators Forum. I'll pull it up at the end there, but I can't multitask right now. Would love to join the Facebook group. Hope you can. Can you put the link? Oh, I guess I better do. Oh, did somebody do it? Yay! Rock stars, thank you. This is why it's helpful to have helpers, because they can do it for you. You see? It's perfect. James Hawkins updated videos on ISEF. So here's an incredible thing for Creative for Connection that I want to tell you. Before Sue died, this was her last big project that she did. James Hawkins was on the team of it. They redid all the couples videos for the Created for Connection workshop. So they're great videos of couples who volunteered to demo the conversations that couples are going to have. So you could actually use those for the Hold Me Tight. They're, again, not faith-based conversations. The conversations are the same. The only difference in the Hold Me Tight is some of the content just basically says it aligns well with biblical values. And so you can use those, and you can find them on ISEF's webpage. And Sue Johnson didn't use ISEF money for it. She was passionate enough to know that couples needed this, that she actually just paid for it herself and paid for the project to get done. And that was she finished it mid fall of previous year and then passed in the spring. And so she and Kenny were working on this tirelessly towards the end. And so that's something that James was involved in, and you can definitely see those updated videos. They're great. Let's see, workshops offered. So these workshops can only be offered in person. No, they can be offered online. And I do believe there's some online, and I think somebody double check ISEF and just make sure that it's okay that you run one. Thank you for the workshop. You bet. Hold Me Tight's coming up in the St. Louis area. Awesome. Go to them. Go to St. Louis and be in a Hold Me Tight. Come to Fayetteville. Be in ours. Ours fill up pretty quickly, but come. We'd love to have you here. Hold Me Tight's in the St. Louis area. There's the link for them. I think that's all the questions. Can you provide the link to Chad's dissertation? I'll get back to you with that. I'll ask Chad. I'll tell him that I pitched it and that somebody's interested in it. You can email him, chad@thejoshuacenter.com, or you can contact us through our webpage, and I'm sure Chad would love to share his hard work with you in his dissertation. All right. I think that's all of the stuff. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I am so encouraged that this many people want to host. I hope you found this helpful, informative, and that it is going to encourage you to host one of these on your own. Feel free to email me or reach out to me if there's something that I missed. I tried to cover all the things that I possibly could, other than like going into the content, which I feel like it's already out there. It's all the other stuff that sometimes is missed. I'll stick around for a few more minutes if you want to unmute yourself or you have any more questions. Would love to be able to answer any more questions that you have or hear about your thoughts. Can the slides be modified, created for connections? Yes, I think the slides are not PDFs. I think they're workable. So you can remove Bible verses. We just don't use any slide you don't want to use. You don't have to use the whole slide pack. So you can adapt it for yourself. We don't actually use a lot of the scriptures or Bible verses that are in there created for connection. We have a couple other references that we use. And so you can adapt the Hold Me Tight and add other things that you want to include, or you can use the creative for connection and remove some of the faith elements if you don't want to use those. Absolutely. Just like being a therapist with a couple, again, we already stated this, but worth reiterating, you make it your own. You're the person here delivering this content to these couples. And if you bring your authentic self forward and share with them that you want to help them and share the content and the experience and knowledge that you have, that couples will see that and see your genuine interest in helping their relationship. How long in advance do you tend to start marketing? We are notorious for like, oh, we have a conference in 4 weeks and we haven't marketed it yet. Hurry up, put something together. So we have done it as little as a month before. This round, actually, I did it like 3 months out, which is a problem for us because then it fills up and we have to say we're sold out, which feels, I hate telling couples no, but they fill up. And so then we end up filling up the next one. So we already have couples signed up for our May one that couldn't come to this one. And I need you guys to host more of these so that they're available out there. Please, in your community, host one and I will send people your direction. Destination, Hold Me Tights, and Created for Connections in all of your areas. Anyone else have any other questions or comments? All right, Courtney, I think that's my best effort. I did all that I could.
Thank you so much. This was incredibly helpful, and you're so gracious with your time.
Thank
We're
you.
all very
We
thankful.
will have this video available on, like I said, our website and on the St. Louis website. Give us a couple days to turn that around. Reach out to the St. Louis community to find out all the incredible trainings that they have coming up. And if you need anything from Chad and I, we love connecting with people out there who are trying to invest in the community. We'd love to help you guys.
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions, you can also contact us through the stleft.com contact us page. We'll get an email and we'll get right back to you. So,
yay. Bye, everybody. Have a great rest of your Monday.
Bye. Thank you.